So today, I'm going to be documenting the upgrades that I'm making to the XDLightScope project. Now, if you've seen my previous video, you'll know that the LightScope is written using C++ and I'm building it on top of the Juice framework so that I have multi-platform compatibility. It's VST or audio unit, Windows or Mac. So the project is managed using the Producer app. It's an app that comes with Juice as one of the extras. I'm using Xcode to edit the code and to build my test objects. So in my previous video, I showed how the scope is actually in a fixed size window. And I wanted to have it as a resizable window. I also want to have the scope to be always on top, to always be showing over the top of whatever you're using. I know that Ableton does this, and I'm sure that other DAWs do it as well. When you're changing between channels, then it will close the plugin windows that you've got open for that channel and open the ones that you've got for the other channel. But I want my scope window to stay on top all the time. So those are the adjustments that we're going to be doing today. And I'm going to be doing a few other adjustments as well. A really important one is to be able to resize the waveform, make it bigger or smaller. And I want to be able to draw guidelines that aren't at 0 dB, like I just use a selectable sort of level. Now I'm also maintaining a Git repo on GitHub. I'll leave a link to that in the description. I've pushed all of the changes that I've made in this video up onto that repo so that you can download them. Now I've only tested this on Mac as an audio unit and as a VST. So if you've got a Windows machine or if you've got a different DAW that you want to test it on for me, please let me know. Hit me up in the comments if you do it so that I can see how you go. And let me know about any bugs that you find. One of the first things that I'm going to actually do is to put the LightScope window into its own window instead of having it as part of the plugin window. And to accomplish that, I'm going to add a new component, and I'm going to call this floating scope. So originally, the scope was drawn in the actual plugin editor, which was fine. It worked well enough, but it won't let me do the always on top feature that I want, and a lot of DAWs don't support resizable plugin windows. So I need to have a window which is open independently of the editor. So I've moved a lot of the scope graphics objects into their own component. So Juice components have a method that gets called when a component is resized. It's called resized. This method is also called once before the plugin's first displayed. So it's safe for us to just have all of the code which sizes the individual scope graphic elements in that resize method. One of the other things that I want to do with this processor is I want to add a few parameters. I want to be able to scale the size of the waveform. And then I want to have guidelines that show either where 0 dB or some other value that I set. So that's 2 parameters. And then I want to be able to add some extra parameters in the future. Now, I said before that I'm managing this project using Producer. It also has a really cool feature where it can produce a blank project from a template. All the templates are built into the code. Now, those templates are great, but I needed templates that would suit me, so I've made modifications to Producer. When I went to add parameters to the XDLightScope, instead of rewriting all the code, I've actually just started a new project and migrated the code from the old XDLightScope into the new XDLightScope. I want to make sure that the new project has all of these settings to be the same, so that it shows up as the same plug when it gets loaded. This is XDMM, and then this is U, ZDI. Exporters. I know I have something set in here. Is microphone access. By default, this is disabled. I want that to be enabled so that I can test the standalone version and have music flowing into it. And now, the files that come in my template, they're all ready to go with parameters and with a dialogue and a controls section and everything. And in fact, let's have a look at that first, the controls that we want to add. And by default, gives us a 400 by 300 window for controls. It's probably going to be too big for my purposes. Let's make that a 300 by 100. And keeping in mind that the scope itself is actually going to be now a separate window that's going to float. And this is just going to be the controls for that scope. And I want to have two sliders. One's going to be the horizontal scale. And a horizontal slider will suit me just fine. Might just set these apart a little bit so that I can have labels for them as well. And this one's going to be a guide. Now, all of these minimum, maximum values and everything will be set. The template's got other mechanisms for doing that. All I got to do is make sure that these names are what they are. And now labels. New label here. Oh, this is vertical scale. Copy, paste. And this one's going to be guide. Fantastic. Because I'm using my own template, a lot of what you're seeing here where I'm naming each element in the GUI editor, that won't apply across a stock Juice project because I've got my own template code. So the important things I wanted to add were these parts, the parameters and listeners, and this create parameter layout. It's all of the scaffolding code that you need in Juice to have support for parameters. So here in plugin processor, I have templates. I'm going to take the slider parameter template and craft it to fit. And here I change this to be vert scale, just like it is here. And in the plugin editor, there is now the code that loads the or connects all of the parameters to the GUI elements that I've got here now. This find child with ID from the controls section will look for these names. Units are going to be in decibels. Label is only, that's how it's going to show up in the door. What's a good minimum value for the vertical scale? Minus 24, and a good maximum value will be 24. We can go in steps of 0.1, and there's not going to be any exponent. 0 dB default. Fantastic. And in here is where we will put the code, which does all of the updates. So let's make some space and drop the other parameter there as well. This one is for the guide. So, guide, ID is the same, guide. And I think I'm going to use decibels for this one as well. Cool. So that's two parameters. Yeah, my template that I've modified the producer to produce. It's very simple to manipulate, to add parameters, to manipulate the GUI, and all of those will automatically appear in the scope. And in fact, if we go to standalone plugin and run, we should find it building and opening up with a window with the two parameters in it. It's kind of cool if it works first time. Build succeeded. Attaching. It's going to ask for microphone access. There it is. And there it is. And it's got the same look and feel as well that I've created for my plugins. -24, +24. Fantastic. Why don't we add a control? Have a button here, like a toggle button, that will allow you to open and close the window from within the editor, and maybe even make it a plugin parameter so that we can open and close it and have that state saved with the project. A new toggle button will look something like that. So it'll be another parameter. This will be called show scope. There's the text for it. I'll just put show as the text. And then here in plugin processor, I have a template for a push button. We'll make the default action to be hide and show. Label, show, scope. Very good. So let's copy over the processing code. Now in the template here, it's already created a DSP section where with the old code, I didn't have a DSP section. Instead, I was loading the components directly into the audio processor. So here I have the buffers and a parameters object and the mutex. But that's all going to change now. So these things here, these circular buffers, are actually going to become members of the DSP. This way the DSP part itself actually stays separate. And then I have these parts. One of the really cool things about my DSP library is that I've got a specialized objects class, which is called parameters. And as the name says, it contains all of the parameters that are going to be important for the DSP processing. Things like the current sample rate or the current buffer size. It even holds things like the current song position and tempo. And then a reference to a parameters object is passed around to all of the objects that are in the DSP network. That way, I only have to change the sample rate in one place or change the buffer size in one place, and that change will get propagated throughout the entire plugin. So because we're putting the code to manage the floating window inside the audio processor, I needed a mechanism to make sure that all of the window management and graphics code doesn't run in the audio thread. For example, when your plugin accepts a parameter change message from the DAW, that can happen in the message thread or it can happen in the audio thread, and you have to be able to account for both. And Juice has got a mechanism for doing just this. It's called async updater, which is perfect for this kind of execution management. Let's open up the Juice class index. Events, async updater. We need this handle async update. It's called by the message thread, which is exactly what we want. So we're going to have handle async update to be the method where we do all the opening and closing of the floating scope window, and that way it'll be handled safely. So plugin processor is going to become as well async updater. So let's add that method here. So now this code is going to say whether we show or hide our floating scope window. So let's put the floating scope, let's actually make sure that it's a dynamic object. That would be null pointer for the most part, and then we'll have a Boolean for should scope be visible. Now the parameter defaults to false, so should our Boolean variable, and then the update code will be trigger async update. Cool. So since I needed a set of guides for every scope, it made sense to add the code to draw the guidelines to the actual scope objects themselves. Now the scope objects have two methods. There's the paint method, which Juice uses to repaint the component when it comes time to repaint it. And then I added a method called update so that I can call update once, and then the repaint method doesn't have to do all the calculations again. It can just refer to whatever calculations were done in the update method. So update is called 30 times a second, and then repaint's called as much as needed, because if something obstructs the window, then, or if you close and reopen it, you need to repaint it again. But with the update method being called only once every 30 seconds, that's where all the heavy work's done, and then the repaint method is it's much simpler. All it has to do is repaint. But I forgot that in the update method, I was using coordinate space, which followed the actual pixels on the screen. But in the repaint method, the coordinate space follows the window coordinates, which are scaled on modern displays. So that resulted in this really weird bug happening at the beginning, where you'll see the guidelines, they don't focus in the middle. Instead, they were coming to the bottom. That was happening in the initial tests, but I found the bug and fixed that before I pushed the update. Let's look at these parameters here. Vertical scale. If what's it called? Scope. We're always going to check for the null pointer, because now this scope is a dynamic object. There it is. So we're checking for the null pointer. Very important we do that. We want to do a dB to linear conversion. Vertical scale equals scale. So we've got a vertical scale adjustment now. Same thing here. Check for the null pointer. Do a decibel to linear conversion. Now, having the scopes in a floating scope component's fine, but the floating scope component itself is only really designed to be a component inside a window. It's not designed to be put directly onto the desktop. Juice comes with a object class which is designed to be put onto the desktop. It's called document window. I made a subclass of document window, which I called scope window. So the reason I made a subclass of document window was so that I could capture the closed window event. That's important so that we can update that parameter that we created earlier so that we can show and hide the window. I wanted that to be updated when the window was closed by other means, like if you hit the close button in the corner, for example. The Juice document window class has also got a mechanism for saving the state of the window as a string. I leveraged that so that I could have the state of the window being saved with the project. colors. Well, now that should be zooming into the middle there, but it's not. I can work out what level this is at, sort of. I've built the gain up until, oh, look at that, we're at about minus 13 dB. Yeah, cool. Right, well that works. So, a few little problems there to fix. The guide level, I don't know what's going on with that. That should be drawing just one line that comes down to the middle there. I'm clearly scaling it wrong. Let's see what happens when we build it as a plugin and load it up in Ableton. Build succeeded. Let's do it. My load of projects that I've already got scope working in. All right, so this is another track. Don't know when this will be released, but it's one I've been working on lately. I was debugging another problem this morning. So it's ready to go. There it is, the LightScope. Hit show. And hey, the scope stays up when I go into other channels. That's really cool. It's got kind of weird behavior though when I when I click away from it. Those clicks don't really seem to do anything. Oh, here we go. So I can load it in there. I can see just the bass channel, but I can go clicking around. Wow. See how the kick just disappeared? Yep, cool. Oh, I want to put that onto melody bus. And then I can go clicking around. That's really cool. The scope stays up. That's exactly what I wanted. I had to fix a few mistakes before I got the scope working with an actual waveform. Had really poor graphics performance in the initial tests as well, especially if the scope window was really big. Now, I improved the performance by drawing the scope window into a buffer instead of drawing it directly onto the screen. And that meant that when the scope was advanced, when new audio data come in, I could simply, copy that or pre-drawn waveform across instead of recalculating the whole thing again. So yeah, I've still got some features that I want to add to this scope. I want to add a spectrum analyzer. I might have that as a switch, so it changes from the colored scope into the spectrum analyzer. So keep an eye on the GitHub repo, but I'll be sure to be posting a video whenever I make major changes to the LightScope as well. Really excited about documenting the changes and updates that I make to it. So if you've compiled and loaded the scope on your own machine, please hit me up in the comments. Let me know how you went. I'll be interested to see how this works on Windows. Haven't had a chance to test that myself yet. Or running inside doors that aren't Ableton, because that's all I'm using at the moment. Hit the like and hit the subscribe, and leave a comment down there. And if your eyes glazed over and you thought this was boring, check out my other videos. I'm doing stuff on music mixing and creative process as well. So yeah, stick around for the next video and I'll see you then.